We're going to try something a little different today, inspired by Malcolm Geet, poet that everybody should go check out if you're into poetry, or if you're not, maybe he'll make you into poetry. This video that my older brother sent me of him where he's talking about a quote from Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. Lord of the Rings, I'm sure everybody's familiar with. And this is actually a quote that makes it into the movies. Not in its entirety, but you get the gist of it. But I'm just, as everybody that knows me knows, I love stories. And I think to a certain extent that we live in a story. But anyways, so I'm gonna read a little bit from this. I've got a little passage from Luke, and yeah, so here we go. This is again from Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. It's a cute, beautiful little leather-bound version that my sister and her brother got me. So this is Sam speaking to Frodo. They are just having made it out of Osgiliath and are on like the borders of Mordor essentially. And some chaos is about to ensue. Chaos has been ensuing, and they're not having a great time. And so this is an exchange that they have as they begin to make the final stretch of their journey. Frodo says, "I don't like anything here at all," said Frodo. "Step or stone, breath or bone, earth, air, and water all seem accursed, but so our path is laid." "Yes, that is so," says Sam. "And we shouldn't be here at all, if we'd known more about it before we started. But I suppose it's often that way. The brave things in the old tales and songs, Mr. Frodo, adventures, as I used to call them. I used to think that they were the things wonderful folk of the stories went out and looked for because they wanted them, because they were exciting and life was a bit dull, a kind of sport, as you might say. But that's not the way of it with the tales that really mattered, or the ones that stay in the mind. Folk seem to have just landed in them, usually. Their paths were laid that way, as you put it. But I expect they had a lot of chances, like us, of turning back, only they didn't. And if they had, we wouldn't know, because they'd have been forgotten. We hear about those as just went on, and not all to a good end, mind you, at least not what folk inside a story, or not outside a story, would call a good end. You know, coming home and finding things all right, not quite the same, like old Mr. Bilbo. But those aren't always the best tales to hear, though they may be the best tales to get landed in. I wonder what sort of tale we have fallen into." "I wonder," said Frodo, "but I don't know. And that's the way of a real tale. Take any one that you're fond of. You may know or guess what kind of tale it is, happy ending or sad ending, but the people in it don't know, and you don't want them to." "No, sir, of course not. Beren now, he never thought he was going to get that Silmaril from the Iron Crown of Thangorodrim, and yet he did, and that was a worse place and darker danger than ours. But that's a long tale, of course, and goes on past the happiness into grief and beyond it. And the Silmaril went on and came to Arendelle. And why, sir, I've never thought of that before. You've got some of that light in that star glass that the lady gave you. Why, to think of it, we're in the same tale still. It's continuing on. Don't the great tales never end?" "No, they never end as tales," said Frodo. "But the people in them come and go when their part has ended. Our part will end later, or sooner." Now, quickly read as well Luke 18, 32, 33, and 34. It says, and this is Jesus speaking, For he shall be delivered unto the Gentiles, he being the Son of Man. For he shall be delivered unto the Gentiles, and shall be mocked, and spitefully entreated, and spitted on. And they shall scourge him, and put him to death, and on the third day he shall rise again. And they, being the disciples, understood none of these things, and this saying was hid from them, neither knew they the things which they were spoken. Now, how those two things might go together might seem a bit of a stretch, but let me cook real quick. So, the idea that Jesus is speaking about there and saying that the things have been hidden from them in the text, I get the same energy from what Frodo is saying, but in the affirmative rather than in the negative. So Sam is speaking to this idea that stories, great stories, memorable stories, are usually taken on by people who weren't seeking glory, weren't seeking adventure necessarily. They were victims of circumstance, and that's what makes them great. Is not they weren't driven to it by ambition, they were driven to it by duty. And Frodo goes on to say, because Sam asks him, do you think we're in a story? Frodo says, I don't know. And then continues to say, I don't think we like stories where the characters know they're in a story. Which is an interesting thing, caveat-wise, but here is how, because it sounds counter to what I believe, which is I love to think of my life as a story. But here's what I think Frodo's saying and why I read that verse from Luke as well. When we become so outside of being, when we constantly break that fourth dimension and think that we have this sort of transcendent view of what it means to exist, which I think our culture is very guilty of. Like Christianity-wise, I think that there's not good theology that maybe lends itself in that direction. But I mean more like secular-wise, and that's really how it has bled into Christianity, in my opinion, is we culturally have conceded this ground of experiential reality, and we're way more focused about the measurable reality, right? So why did I read Luke? Jesus is accusing the disciples here. Without accusing, he's offering them something that they can't understand why. He's explicitly saying to them what's going to happen, that he's going to be killed. The Son of Man will be killed, and he will rise again on the third day. They are incapable of understanding the truth that is being revealed to him because of the theological, philosophical, prophetical views that they have of Messiah. Their understanding of Messiah would not allow them to understand that the Messiah will die, because that's what Christ is telling them, and they can't understand it. So again, how does this tie back? When we become so removed from experience, from, as my little brother would call it, slice of life, we see the world in such a meta way that we remove ourselves from the story. We become a character who sees the story as something, a subject, rather than me being the subject of a story. Being part of a story is scary. And especially as a Christian, we at least know what that means, where it means that you have to trust the author. And trusting the author to know that his ending will be good and righteous and pure, and that doesn't contradict his love for me. It's a very Christian thought. It's a very Christian idea. Frodo is saying to Sam, we don't know if our story is going to end good, if it's going to end bad, if we're going to die, if we're going to get tortured to death, if we're going to ever make it home, if we live happily ever after, or if we just fall into obscurity. But that's not why Frodo is doing what he's doing. Frodo is doing what he's doing because he has a duty, because it's the right thing to do. He doesn't care about the context of the story. He cares about righteousness. I guess I just really wanted to open up a door for mystery, for a lack of knowledge, and that lack of knowledge not being a failure or a design flaw, but actually being a part of the story. And if you're uncomfortable with that tool, that narrative tool, then you're never actually going to be able to participate in the story. I don't know if that made sense. I hope it did. Love you guys.